What's going on, you guys? Last week I didn't end up posting 2 videos, so I'm gonna try to post 3 videos this week. Today's topic, I'm gonna talk about general principles for programming. This video is gonna cover 3 of them, and those principles are progressive overload, specificity, and periodization. I did a video a couple weeks ago talking about hiring a coach and why you should hire a coach. And I talked about programming for yourself a little bit, and when that's appropriate and why. And I realized that there might be someone watching this who's interested in how to design programs, powerlifting programs. So these ideas are general. They can be applied to any kind of programming, whether you're a powerlifter, bodybuilder, Olympic weightlifter, track athlete. But I'm going to focus more so on how this relates to powerlifting programming specifically. So the first principle, which I think is the most important, especially for powerlifting or performance sports, like track and field or powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, is progressive overload. So what is progressive overload? That is when you increase the reps, sets, or weight over time. In powerlifting, the most important thing, of course, is weight, right? What we're looking to do is to increase our 1 rep max on squat, bench, and deadlift, right? So over time, as you become a better powerlifter and as you try to, fill out your weight class, you are going to want to increase your total volume. So your working sets is probably going to increase over time. But most importantly, what you're looking to do is to add weight. So if you look at beginner programs like Starting Strength, typically the volume remains the same over the course of the program. So Starting Strength is 3x5 on squat, bench, and deadlift. And it remains that way throughout the entirety of the program. But if you read what it says to increase, the weight every session or every other session, and you add less as you get stronger, or less frequently. But the point there is that the main goal is to add more weight, because that's what you want to do. You want to become stronger for powerlifting. The second is specificity. The second principle, specificity. So what is specificity? That is how specific your training is to your sport. In other sports, sport-specific training for soccer would be playing soccer, right? Or that would be like the most sport-specific. For powerlifting, that the most specific thing that you can do would be like a heavy single. Now, the reason that I bring up specificity is because a lot of people, when they're first getting started in general, health, just trying to get stronger, specificity doesn't really matter. If your goal is just to generally be healthy, then you should train generally, do some strength training, some cardio, reps and sets, it's not all that important. But as you become more focused on a specific sport, the more important it is to focus on specificity. What that can look like is exercise selection, weight, and your total volume, especially rep ranges. So something that would be more general, less specific, would be an exercise that is further away from a comp lift. So for example, if we're talking about the squat, if you do a low bar squat, a high bar squat with, a belt, knee sleeves, and competition stance and depth, that would be a very close variation, and that's still highly specific, right? versus if you are to do a leg extension, that is more general and less specific to powerlifting, but it still has its place, of course. And if we're talking about reps, that might look, if you're looking at something that is more specific, a single at 95% is pretty specific, or, you know, hitting a PR, versus doing a set of 12 is less specific. So even if you're doing something like, if you're doing a competition stance, competition grip squat, and you're doing a set of 12, that is less specific for powerlifting. However, we need to do that because we need to get bigger as well as stronger. A bigger muscle is a stronger muscle. So specificity really becomes more important the closer you get to a competition, which brings us to the last principle, which is periodization. What is periodization? That is when you take a program or a plan and it takes you through multiple phases, leading from, you know, one goal to the next goal, and you see the differences in those phases, that is periodization. If you take a program that does not change over the course of time, it just remains the same, you know, from start to finish, that would be a poor example of periodization because nothing is changing, right? So what does periodization look like? For powerlifting specifically, typically you'll see 3 main phases. Usually there's a hypertrophy phase of some kind, a strength phase, and then like a peaking block or peaking phase, right? So what do those phases look like? A hypertrophy phase is going to be the least specific. You're going to have more accessories on average, higher total volume typically, and your rep ranges are going to be usually a little bit higher than they will in the later phases. Excuse me. So you might see, you might have your competition lifts, or you probably will have your competition lifts, but you might be doing sets of 8 instead of heavy singles. Or you might have one set of 5 or one set of 3, and then your back downs will be sets of 8 to 12. And then all of your accessories typically are going to be somewhere in that 8 to 15 rep range. A strength phase, typically you'll be doing more sets of 3 to 5 or 3 to 6 reps, especially for your competition lifts. So you might have 3 sets, 4 sets of 5 or 6 reps on squat, bench, deadlift, maybe as low as 3 reps. And then you might see a little bit of a reduction in your total volume, especially for your accessories. Sometimes people will match the total volume by increasing the competition lift volume while decreasing the accessory volume. Then in a peaking block, typically you'll only do this, you know, like once or twice a year, whereas the other phases you might do, you know, 3-4 times during a year, depending on how many competitions you do and, you know, how much muscle you need to put on, how strong you need to get. Peaking phase typically is no more than 3 to 4 weeks. And over the course of that, you end up tapering your volume down, especially the last week leading up to a competition. You also are doing the most specific training. So you're typically doing singles or maybe doubles on your competition lifts. Usually you're leading up to something pretty heavy. And the goal there is to prepare you and your nervous system to be as strong as you possibly can on competition day. Your goal typically is not to gain any more muscle and not to actually necessarily get stronger, as you don't really have enough time to get significantly stronger, but you can prime your nervous system to have the best performance during that block. So those were the 3 principles of programming that I talked about today. Those were progressive overload, specificity, periodization. There are more principles, but if you guys are interested and you liked this video, leave me a comment. Tell me that you want a part 2. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next one.